It is so nice to see so many familiar faces in the audience. On behalf of the Cargo Crew team, including CEO Matt Blaschke and our incredible founder, Felicity Rodgers, I'd like to welcome you all to Cargo Crew House. For those of you I haven't met, my name is Melissa Singer, and it's my pleasure to host this conversation this morning, which I'm sure will be equal parts inspiring, motivational, and hopefully give some of you some practical tips that you can take back to your businesses. So have a pen or a notes file handy. You are going to want to remember some of the pearls from our amazing panel today. And we will open up to questions at the end. So the format will have a discussion for about 30 minutes and then we'll have some questions. And please keep them handy. So without further ado, allow me to introduce you to our fabulous special guest. First, one of our hosts of today, Cargo Crew's founder and chief creative, Felicity Rodgers, also the architect of the concept behind Cargo Crew House, this amazing space that we're all in today. On her left, I had to practice my left and rights before we got here, Edward Pearse, the creative director of Time and Place, whose developments include Melbourne's newly opened Hannah Street Hotel, which is causing a lot of buzz around the city. So congratulations on that. And we have creative director and designer Genevieve Smart, the co-founder of Ginger and Smart, which will be familiar to many of you. And Genevieve has also designed uniforms for brands including Jetstar. More recently, she has been working with the Cargo Crew team to create the Genevieve Smart for Equipped capsule, which many of you would have seen up the front today. And I think it's going to be a huge hit. It's really beautiful. And finally, on my left, a man who needs no introduction in the areas of Australian retail, fashion and design, Country Road founder and retail impresario, Stephen Bennett. Please make them all welcome. All right. Now, as we all know, we're here today because of uniforms, but before we dive into some of the serious topics, I wanted to ask each of our panellists to share their memories of their first uniform or a uniform that has made an impact on their lives. I know I've had some that have definitely influenced my life. So Felicity, as our host, let's start with you, if you will indulge us.
Obviously, it's a hot topic for me, being in uniforms. But I think as far as the narrative around what has had the most impact, it would have to be taking me back to the original days of founding Cargo Crew and working with, at the time, Paul Mathis, who was developing Federation Square. And at that time, you know, I used to meet with Paul. He kind of gave me this vision of what he wanted to do with the uniforms at the space, which was Taxi Restaurant, Chocolate Buddha, you know, the places that are still there. But I remember having multiple meetings with him and we decided and landed on these cute taxi shirts for the taxi venue. And I suppose the love and the design thinking that went into creating those shirts was one of the first projects that I ever did starting the business. And it was all manufactured in Melbourne. And it still just has such fond memories to me, the significance of the design process, working with a visionary like that in hospitality. So really has also probably helped shape the business in so many ways. So that's my memory.
Do you still have it in your archive?
We're what we call the Cargo Crew time capsule. And so many things. There's definitely a taxi shirt in there. I think my husband, Paul, who runs the operations of our business and is also a co-founder, he constantly says, Felicity, we've got to get rid of some of this stuff. And I'm like, we can't. There's all a reason for it.
I mean, like Gucci's now having to buy archival pieces off collectors because some of their stuff has gone missing over the years. So
important.
You know, just show your husband that example. You can't get rid of it. How about you, Steve? Do you have a memory of a uniform that's meant something special to you?
Yeah, I actually thought I'd wear one today. I remember that back in the, I started in women's wear as a salesman with a company called Trent Nathan doing women's wear. Then I went to a brand called Thomas Wardle, who was really strong in baby doll dresses and things. And it was the early 70s and the denim boom hit. And I went to Tom and said, look, we've got to get into this denim business. This is sport. He said, no, you'll never make the effing money out of sportswear. It's all about dresses. I said, well, so subsequently I said, well, look, the denim thing had just taken off, like unbelievable. And denim really, if one analyses, a pair of jeans is a serious piece of workwear. And I used to love stores like Mitchell's, which was all army disposals, and another one was called Sam Bear. So the only place you could buy Levi's when I was a kid was these sort of workwear shops. But the fascination was how, when you went and looked at workwear in its true sense, it really was beautifully made, it was great fabrics, it was well stitched. So brands like Oshkosh, and this is Oshkosh, which you'd see. So we started buying really good workwear fabrics, making them in menswear factories, initially for women. And it was dominated by chambrays, ginghams and stripes. So because we couldn't have enough to indent, we were buying stock from the Japanese mills, who still do it. And I bought a book here, one of the Japanese still fascinated with workwear. So that was my first experience of falling in love with workwear.
I love that. Thanks for sharing that with us. And yeah, Steve's brought this amazing book. So if anyone wants to check it out afterwards, I'm sure he'd love to share it. Let's pass the mic to Edward. How about you, Edward? Did you grow up wearing a uniform for school or for a first job?
Well, that's exactly where I was going to go. So, I think my first recollection was obviously, a school uniform, and the different uniforms I wore through different schools as well. And I think one of the really interesting things was, as you get older and seeing how different, pupils wore different uniforms, wore the same uniform in different ways, and started to customize and personalize that kind of experience. So, from being a junior with my brother's older sort of blazer, which was far too big for me, to then growing through and then getting my own blazer and something which actually then did fit. It was kind of a really interesting experience. And I think it's probably my first real experience.
Yeah, I think it's a fascinating idea, which I think Felicity can probably relate to as well. And many of you here who are operators, is that idea of having a framework and then working out where you can sort of colour inside the lines and sometimes go slightly outside the lines. I know in my case, I really wanted to wear Doc Martens when I was in year 12 and I begged my mother for a pair and they were an absolute no-no at my school, which was quite strict around uniforms. So I used to take my knee-high socks and roll it down over the 8-ups and make them look like they were school shoes. But eventually they caught up with me. Genevieve, how about you? Is there a uniform in your life that sticks out?
Well, yes, my school uniform, but actually I was just thinking before that I was actually a brownie, if anyone was a brownie. So it was kind of, the secret language of brown. And there was a hierarchy. So the deepest brown was Brown Owl, who was the brown, the leader. And so it was sort of so practical and so much about they had like a yellow, sort of optimistic yellow kind of necktie, but everything else was brown because it was designed for sort of hiking and polishing silver and being a good goody two shoes. And the only thing that differentiated you was your merits, like what badges you got. And so, I didn't really ever get many badges. But so I guess it was this kind of very democratic sea of brown, but it was actually, thinking back, it was quite chic, I guess, like right now it's all about brown. But it did take me a while to get over brown. But I do remember that sort of, brown, okay, this is a hierarchy. But yeah, then when I went to school, actually, we were lucky enough to have Jill Fitzsimon design our school uniform. So it's the first time I saw a designer's name in a school uniform. I was like, oh, this is so fabulous. I mean, she was quite big in the 80s and that's when I was at school. So yeah, I guess that was the first time I saw a designer's name in a uniform and I thought, oh, this is a lovely crossover. Yeah.
And we've seen that legacy continue not only with school uniforms, but we've seen it with our airline uniforms and great names of fashion joining the ranks and and you're among those. So it's wonderful to have you here as well. And we'll talk about some of the processes that you've gone through to do those projects. Felicity, I want to come back to you. Those were all wonderful anecdotes, and I'm sure everyone here really enjoyed them. And it really shows us how uniforms can impact our experience and our memories, and how critical what we wear is to how we feel and how we remember and experience. And anyone who says that, fashion is just clothes, as someone who worked as a fashion editor for many, many years, I would always challenge them. And it was always the psychology of fashion, which is what really kept me going and kept me intrigued in the space. So I know there's a couple of other fashion writers here today who feel the same way, and I have a lot of respect for those ladies as well. So let's talk about Cargo Crew for a moment. 24 years. What an achievement, first of all. I think that deserves a round of applause in itself. Now, some of you here will know a bit about the Cargo Crew backstory, but for those who maybe aren't as familiar, I'd love to hear from you about what first got you into this world, and what the uniform landscape in Australia was like when you started.
Well, I guess obviously having shared the story about Paul Mathis and that experience, I do recall, particularly around that time, hospitality uniforms was really at that kind of stage of just black and white. It was like white shirts, black aprons. So obviously I started the business having studied fashion. And I was, doing small projects on my own for about 6 years. Then my sister joined me in the business, and her background was advertising, and really, she really bought the service element. So as far as like what the landscape was, it was black and white for hospitality, and then there was a lot of promo businesses that were just whacking logos on T-shirts and polos. And I think together what her and I really recognised was this opportunity to actually take that fashion element and deliver it to businesses and create a brand experience. So again, back to the service part, back to the design, it was the feeling we wanted people to have a feeling of brand rather than just a promotional piece that they wore when they, turned up for work. So that was really the landscape, and I think what we did really focus on bringing. And I feel like that today continues to be our mission. So, yeah.
How do you think it's changed, just to sort of follow on from that?
I just think in general, there is just, if you're thinking, I suppose, from a customer perspective, and you put your kind of like, feet in the position of the customer, what do they first see when they come into your venue, come into your business, into your brand? You have to be thinking about that. Everything is about now visual, customer experience, shareability. So I think the importance of, when we first started, we wanted to create a brand. We were passionate about it, but maybe people weren't as obsessed at that point about the whole visual. Whereas now I think it's so important for all businesses and brands to kind of have those touch points nailed down. So I think the change and the shift is that obsession with visual handwriting of a business, and what we're doing is really supporting that. Yeah.
Steve's nodding a lot, so I want to throw to Steve. You're definitely one of Australia's style pioneers, having launched Country Road many years ago now, more than 50 years ago. I'd love to hear from you what you think is great style, and how do you know great style when you see it?
Well, I think there's a big difference between fashion and style. I think some people get confused. To me, fashion changes, but style never dies. And I think that and it's not about being arrogant, but we basically made clothes that were the lifestyle that we felt we could honestly express. And I think, taking Felicity's point about even the word crew, even in the name, means that people want to do business with a company that they feel relates to their values. And it's interesting that there's so much competition out there now that you can get products everywhere. But it's really, the catalyst is, do you want to get them from that company? So it's needs and wants. And I know the work I do at Mecca, we spent a lot of time saying that they've got to want to shop here because the competition in cosmetics is huge. And we spend a lot of time trying desperately to want people to shop with us. So the investment in training, the ratio of salary to profitability is probably the highest in the industry, but because we add training to it. And at Country Road, we had a very big educational learning process. So if you can get over that hurdle from needs to wants, which is, I think, what Cargo Crew's done, is that they want to buy their workwear or their uniforms, is a big hurdle. And if you ignore it and say, no, I'm going to get my business by discounting, I'm going to get my business by going to the fabric's not good enough, but I can still make the same amount of money, you're dead. Because at the end of the day, price is not a strategic advantage. Everyone can be cheaper than you. And if you're in the rag trade and you go and spend an hour in Uniqlo, it scares the bloody hell out of you.
I wanted to stick with Steve just for one more moment. Really interested in the idea of the role that fashion plays in uniform design and vice versa. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about how uniforms, or the idea of uniform dressing, which is, you know, people think that this concept's just been invented, or it was invented by Steve Jobs, but really, I mean, you were a pioneer in this country. How did those ideas help inform how you conceived the idea of workwear for Country Road?
Well, I think that the whole concept to us, there was a couple of advantages that happened, because from the jean boom, it went into this sort of, they use the word preppy or whatever it is, this sort of youth dressing that was classy youth dressing. In other words, you wore shirts and ties and jackets, but as Ed said, they were looser and they fitted differently, and the ties were fatter, and there was a style, because we all came out of the war. And my generation came out of a time that was very regimented, and in a way, it then went down into the hippie thing, and we're all wandering around in tie-dyes and bad polyester. So at Country Road, we said, no, we're going to make real clothes. So it was really the fact that, say, the chambray shirt became just a uniform. And I think over the time we sold 4 million of them or something, huge number. But yes, it was a uniform, but guys felt really comfortable in it. We spent a lot of time on getting the colour right, because the typical Japanese chambray's got sort of a grey tone to it. So we spent a lot of time, and believe it or not, there's actually a purple thread in that chambray. And it made guys look handsome. And, if guys look handsome, you're there, because then the girls will come and buy the products. So the girls were a huge asset to us. They liked the look we did. So it was very fortunate, because we were bold enough to open right next to Henry Bucks. And what we came up with was this split suit concept, that all the guys were wearing these typical English suits, very hairy high pants right up here with braces and things. So we decided that why not do a suit they could wear, like a chino fit pair of pants with a blazer, and they had a reefer jacket and thing. They could put it together as a suit, but really it was semi-sportswear. And it was a huge seller, because, what was it called? Dress Down Friday came in. And, poor guys would be going into the stock market with surf gear on or something. So sort of there was I'm not saying it's luck, but society changed, and we read the change, and the menswear was an absolute joy. And, it took off, because it had those base principles of a uniform, but the way you worked it together made you an individual, depending on what sort of pattern you bought.
And I mean, some of those principles are still as current today as they were 50 years ago. Edward, I'd like to bring you in here. Uniforms are obviously a core part of many of Time and Place's projects, especially the hotel projects. How do you ensure a seamlessness between all the facets of the project? We were just talking before about Hannah Street, including the uniforms, and how crucial do you think they are to the overall success of a project?
I mean, Hannah Street's a unique sort of proposition. On the back of delivering Ace Hotel in Sydney, we brought an international lifestyle brand hotel with very much a American kind of way of operation to the Australian market, and obviously it's been very well sort of accepted and regarded. But while we're doing that, we saw the fact that the Americans didn't necessarily understand the cultural kind of significance of how different we are from America to Australia. So what Hannah Street really had the opportunity to do was actually recast that kind of same idea around lifestyle, but in a Melbourne context. So when you talk about Melbourne and what a hotel can be, but a hotel, Melbourne's never had that sort of international independent hotel for such a great city of tourism. So that's kind of what we've sought to do. So having Melbourne, having kind of, the whole kind of design with David Black doing the interiors, it needed sort of, uniforms to kind of complement that. It needed uniforms that reflected, Melbourne as a culture, as a society as well. And it needed to kind of embrace that, but it also needed to sit there quietly in the background and not necessarily shout itself out. So, every time I'm traveling to a new hotel or a new restaurant or, wherever there's a uniform, trying to understand kind of the key moves of what that uniform's doing and how people are wearing it and what the different plug and play and how that sort of works together. And, through those, admittedly the uniform for Hannah Street came very late in the piece. Thanks, Felicity. You jumped onto a massive challenge. I think we sort of, we worked at light speed there. But what that sort of showed is that the ability to sort of, choose different pieces from standard collections, but then personalize them and customize them to really have an independence there was a key driving factor for us. And, we didn't know, the sizes and the gender of any of our staff because that sort of comes quite late in the piece. So we're designing a uniform for people that we don't know yet. But what's really important about the uniform for them, and even just sort of seeing the staff and the front of house start to grow into their, into themselves and understand what it is and actually represent the brand has been really exciting.
Can I pass to you if that's all right? I'd love to hear from you about some of your experiences working with brands. Obviously, some are working with very tight frameworks. Airlines, obviously, there's safety considerations. There's a whole lot of things to consider to, I guess, your equipped capsule, which, maybe you had some more freedom. I'd love to know about how you adapt your creative process with your amazing 30 years of experience behind you to take it into that uniform space. And is it a big leap for you, or is it many of the same processes that you always have gone through being a designer and a creative?
Interesting. I mean, I think it's all about how you feel as a human. I think fashion is, I think you touched on that too. It's how you feel. And I think with Jetstar and the other projects, the first step is always to getting to know the people who are wearing the uniforms and just understanding person to person what they want, how they want to feel every day, what they want to project, from the team itself. And then obviously aligning that with the brand. So there's a lot of kind of conversations and really getting to understand the people who are going to be wearing it at the end of the day. And I think that's quite similar to fashion as well. We're always thinking about our customer and how they're going to feel like, and often that's the fabrication for me. It's like you mentioned this as well, how it feels on the body. I think it's all the senses. It's how you look, but it's also, I think, how you sit, your posture when it's cut in a certain way. It's all like a secret language. And I think it's understanding the language first is really important before jumping into my own collections for Ginger and Smart, and even more so for uniform design. So for me, it's how you feel and the message that you want to send.
I want to ask a little bit about the interplay, or even, I guess, the tension between trend and utility when it comes to uniform design. What role do you think, Jen, that trend plays in uniform design versus function, utility and timelessness?
I don't really feel that trend has a place. I think it's more relevance, like cultural relevance. And you touched on that as well about the split suit. Like that was really culturally relevant at the time. And I think it's more that than trends. I think trends can lead a uniform down the wrong path, not only from a longevity and sustainability perspective, but I think the idea of restraint and relevance also informs a uniform design that allows people to roll the hem if they want to, or bring their own sort of touches to it. I think if it's too trend based, I think it's just very hard in terms of longevity. But
Felicity, did you want to make any comment about the role of trend and how you work with clients?
I think what Jen said is, with our business being so focused on longevity, that's the foundation. So it's functional first. But then I feel like our job in some ways, as Jen said, as far as kind of that cultural relevance, it's about translating the trends so people still feel like they're showing up feeling contemporary and modern, but translating it in a way that's practical and functional and reflects the brand. I think that's the key things for us. Yeah.
I might just stay with you for 1 second because I want to ask just for a couple of you to comment on this. In a world that's so focused on experience, what role do you think the uniforms play in the customer experience, not only the experience of the team and the staff?
I think kind of back to my point earlier about that first impression, looking at it from a customer lens, what are they seeing? But then I also do believe deeply in the psychology part about how people feel when they're dressed in a uniform. How they're feeling will be also how they show up with customer service. And then there's also all the other elements around that kind of connection with their peers. They're part of something. They're part of a business. They representing that business. So I think, from that psychology perspective, it goes quite deep in that regard. And I think businesses can really harness that. Even if it's like today, looking at our team who are here capturing content right now, and the colour tones and the softness of what we've put together for today, but just having that pop and highlight of the printed scarf, which we designed for the event. We just also wanted to show people every day we're helping them look how they're going to show up. So it's also like how we're going to show up when we're doing the same thing. So I think for me, it's just, the importance is thinking about your business, your brand. How can you make that feeling translate for the customer that they're part of something, but also that your team are? For sure.
Edward, in a hotel and hospitality setting, what do you think having a great uniform or a great uniform program allows the customer to do or to feel? Or
particularly with an independent hotel, and all the hotel movements that are happening sort of globally, the customer experience is the thing we're looking for all the time. And it's, obviously how a space looks, how a space smells and the lighting. But also, we knew we'd created something which was really beautiful in terms of what it looked like, but we actually didn't know what it looked like until it had people in. So it wasn't until the staff turned up in the uniform, until the guests arrived with their suitcases, that suddenly you realize that this thing is actually really special. So it's, you can put all the pieces in place, but the final experience is the final touches, and it's the way someone wears it. It's the, at the moment we're just going through kind of adjusting the bit of the lookbook and the style guide to the staff and saying, listen, if your sleeves are a little bit long, just, we're comfortable with rolling that up, or just changing the hem a little bit, or I think that ability for them to show their personality and through something which is then part of the team to then be a customer service sort of experience is really important, and it allows the guest to understand that they're approachable, that they are people, and they are there to basically make their experience better.
That I love when you just mentioned the word approachable, and I was thinking about this also, that sometimes just knowing who the person is that you can go easily identify the person who can help you, that can sort of already take some anxiety out of that, that relationship as well. Steve, I'd love to pick your brain a bit. We're going to throw to the future now. Since leaving Country Road, you've been involved with several retail ventures, most famously working with Mecca on many of their big developments, including what I refer to as the Mecca in Burke Street. What are some of the trends in retail design and experience that you are seeing?
Well, I think there's working with the design team that we did the flagship with, that we did Sydney with. We've tried very hard to, and I suppose it goes back to Country Road where we did our big flagship in South Yarra, where we were first of all able to express man, woman and home together. So the architecture of the product had to be incorporated in walls, floors and ceilings. So the work we did really with in retail, I think, has got to define the customer journey a lot better, but also to give them what Ed said, give them, I don't know if the word's domestic, but there's a comfort level. If you walk into a space and you feel it's over-designed, it's awkward, and I take the point about the Americans, you cannot transpose Australia anywhere in the world, to be honest. It's unique and it's no different than Scotland or Ireland. So creating an environment where people feel comfortable is incredibly important. But the benefit we've got now with being able to have flagship, high street and shopping mall, every one of those treated architecturally different. The shopping malls, you may feel there's a bit of a rollout factor, but now that we've beaten up Sephora, we're now saying we don't have to sort of do a rollout. So we had a concept called Mecca Maxima, which was to try and compete against Sephora, but now they're being converted to Mecca. But it's not going to look like flagship. So the beauty is to create really good experiences in each store they go to, because we don't want someone that goes to, I don't know, to be at Knox City, feels as if it's not as good as the flagship. So it's very much important that the brand, transposes itself in each location. So the girls that work in Knox City feel as proud of what they've got as. But the interesting point because I have worked with Felicity on uniforms, and Mecca's a bit of a bugger on uniforms because basically they're all black. And Joe and I have spoken a lot about this, but I think the point I've come around to is the number one thing with the girls is identification, that they can walk up to a girl. So the investment is huge in education and service as distinct from uniform. So with complimenting Felicity on, I look back at it's not only the actual product, it's the hardware they put on it. Like when you did the leather on when the leather came onto the apron, it just took aprons to another level because all of a sudden there was this, and then the hospitality thing, it separated people that they were proud to wear the uniform, because it wasn't only just an apron, it was a seriously good piece of apparel. And so in uniforms, you do have to relate to the circumstances. So I'm sorry, Mecca's going to be a tricky one going forward. We've had some, good wins.
We're going to open to questions in just a moment. But before we do, it would be remiss of me to not ask Jen just to speak briefly about this beautiful capsule that you've designed and what, I guess, picking up on some of those points that were just raised about some of the detail and some of the finishes and the fabrics that you put into the capsule. Perhaps explain just one or two examples of why you made particular choices, especially for people here who are potential customers of it.
Sure. I mean, I think, for me, uniform design is sort of part of the choreography of a restaurant. I think if it becomes the costume, it's not right. So I think it's the starting off point was, a uniform that became part of the charm of a restaurant. It works with the dance of the lighting and the interiors. So it's sort of was, I guess, influenced a lot by what's happening with interiors. And so the color palette is quite different. It's quite, there's lots of burgundies and chocolate browns. And I think what we wanted to do is create like a feeling through color, but also through fabrication. So we've introduced a seersucker, which is just such a great, originally French fabric that doesn't crush. It's very light and it sort of feels really chic. And I think what we wanted to do is, on that idea of restraint, was have it's in the detail. So the detail of the fabrics, they feel really light. The proportions feel quite new. So it's not about being the standout sort of costume like fashion piece. It's just definitely about a feeling. And I think when you arrive at a hotel and the uniform is really considered, it's sort of this silent language that the hotel has really thought about you as well. And I think that idea of, I guess I always go back to, I want a uniform to look like pieces you might want to buy or wear yourself. I've had experiences where I've been somewhere and I want that. I want the pants they're wearing in that uniform. So I kind of always go there. And certainly with this collection, I want to wear most of the pieces. There's a chocolate brown seersucker suit that I love. It also comes in cream. And the colours just feel like pieces you might have in your home as well. They're sort of quite interiors, I guess. And it's all set on this beautiful cream colour palette with chocolates and burgundies and this sort of mocha mousse colour. So I think there's a gentleness to this collection, but there's also, it's quite contemporary with the cut lines and certainly with the silhouettes and the fabrications. And we also wanted to obviously really consider the environment as well. So a lot of consideration has gone into the sourcing, and I'm so thankful to the team for really pushing that as well to make sure that we're thinking about end of life at every step of the way. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, it's hard to believe that we're already at question time because it's already been such an amazing and inspiring conversation. But I would like to throw it to our gorgeous audience today. If anyone has any questions they'd like to direct to any of the panelists specifically or to the panel in general, just please feel free to throw up your hand. Everyone's a bit shy. Oh, all right. Well, I'll go with a vendor's beard, shall I? That's all right. Edward, you work on a lot of hotel projects, including Hannah Street and the Ace, as we've heard. How are you seeing hotel design evolve to meet and match customer expectation?
It's a good question. But I think one thing which is quite interesting is sort of the deeper we got into creating the Hannah Street brand, the more Instagram kept feeding me more and more kind of independent hotels. And so I'm sure everyone has a sort of similar experience. But so suddenly you're getting this sort of kind of global kind of view of what's happening with trends in terms of hotels, but then that starts to lead into sort of private members clubs and obviously the evolution of kind of Soho House. And they've always had the arm of the guest room kind of experience there as well. And there's this kind of global epidemic of private members clubs as well, which sort of come through kind of as we've been developing the hotel. But it's always, I think the easiest way to think about customer experience or the guest experience is always to put yourself in those shoes as much as possible, and actually go, when I go, what are the things that I'm looking for and how do I heighten them or dull them down, or how do I raise something to the center of attention or hide something in the background. And I think there's a continual sort of, evolution of that, and particularly with the hotel, which is now, we opened in mid-December. My ambition of opening day was to have all 188 rooms full and bustling, which is in reality of trying to open a hotel in December, like that's just not going to be the case. And what's been really great is actually we decided to do a bit of a friends and family sort of launch and just invite all the people that were part of the project or their friends to come and experience that. And we had a sort of a soft launch when we were sort of doing, 30 or 40 rooms a night and allowing the staff and the team to kind of embed themselves and understand the process. And as we've done that, we've sort of tweaked the experience, and that will continue to evolve and just continue to refine kind of what the offering is. And I think these things, like nothing's ever stagnant. I think everything's always evolving. And for us, it's like we've got the great sort of bones of what it is, and getting constant feedback, got some feedback, from a stay last night. The gym closed at 11 p.m. Some people like to do gym work after that.
Some people. I think you've been out. Thank you. Genevieve, you just mentioned the amazing work that you were able to do with Flick and the crew on really driving home that sustainability piece with your capsule. So I thought it would be great to ask each of you about the future of uniforms, whether it's an observation or a prediction. We all know now that in fashion, as in many aspects of our lives, sustainability is a first principle. But are there any other things, or even within that space, that you think we can see sort of coming up?
Yeah, I mean, I think things change all the time. It's no longer, natural fibres, because that's also not great if everybody uses cotton at once, and that's not great. So there's many roads to sustainability, but I think number one, it's building clothes that last, and from the outset, quality pieces that last, not just in durability, but also in style as well, as we've talked about, pieces that you can that last in your wardrobe, and also in a uniform that you can update without having to start again. I think it's the designer's role really to make sure that's inbuilt, and also thinking about end of life as well. So, for example, for Jetstar, they're now recycling their uniform with block text, and the old uniforms have been turned into the plastic trays on board. So you have to, as a designer, think about that from the very beginning. You can't fix it later. So I think it's really getting on board early on with what happens at the end, and just making sure, you're building in longevity. I mean, the longer pieces stay in our wardrobe or in our hotel uniform, the better.
Anyone else want to jump in?
This isn't my expertise, but it's just observations. But it's, I think the thing that we've seen for the hotel particularly is having a series of kit parts. So being able to switch in, switch out things, and then obviously just allowing little pieces of accents, be it the socks, maybe you change the colour there, or the belt, or the little scarf. And I think those ability, maybe some flare pant with a chore jacket, but that flare could then become something else later on. So I think what we're trying to do is have something which does evolve over time, and so it does allow for the flexibility and the comfort of the team who's wearing it.
Yeah, I think just adding to what Ed said, I think, part of our approach, and also with launching Equipped, is about almost having like a foundational wardrobe selection for uniforms. And I think that does help in the piece of giving people that slight bit of variety in, what they feel comfortable in, which is, again, back to the point about making people feel good in uniform, but making sure that there's, parts that connect. So visually there's an alliance with what they're wearing. So I think that's definitely a trend we're seeing. Like, businesses do want their team to be happy in what they're wearing. And it's actually really, really hard to have a one size fits all. It's impossible. So it's actually embracing that and saying, there's a certain look, but there can be a collection within that look. And I think that feels like very much a lot of our clients are leaning into that. Rather than a really strict up and down, everyone has to be exactly the same. So there's definitely that element. And back to Jen's point, the sustainability piece is huge. It's ongoing. We have a really dedicated team at Cargo Crew who it all starts with fabric, because it has to last. And it's one of the hardest jobs in the world, can I tell you, because all fabrics are designed to at some point wear out. And then it depends on the environment, depends on how they're washed and all those things. So it's always a challenge, but it's like being focused on that, doing our own in-house testing as well as external testing, and really trying to educate, as Ed said earlier, about whether it's lookbooks or getting the staff engaged about how they can also help for their uniforms to last longer, and then the end of life is a huge part for us. And that's really a big focus, because that does also have an impact on what fabrics you can blend together, if they can be recycled or made into other things. All those things have to happen at the start of the process. So there's a lot there, but it's an exciting, I think sometimes people are like, oh, you do uniforms, they're school uniforms. But it's such a big, it's a big piece of undertaking. Uniforms, operationally, design, functionality, and sustainability is just a really big piece of that, of course, and continues to evolve. Yeah.
Amazing. Steve, did you want to add anything to the predictions for uniforms? Or even, I was thinking about you, as well as your work with Mecca, you've also mentored and consulted to a lot of fashion brands over the years. And I'm curious as to what the number one problem is that they ask you to help them solve.
That's a big question. maybe I'll go back to what I was going to say. I'll come back to that one. No, I think the big thing that sort of set me in motion, and I think because I didn't study design, was I was fascinated with function. And I think function requires the tools to do things. And I think with the incredible speed we're running at the moment in our lives, between Instagram and social media, everything's going so fast. I think function comes into its own. In other words, clothes that work for the life you live. And I think we're seeing, particularly in the brands I love seeing, there's still a tremendous fashion element in clothing. You look at brands like Filson and Taliesin and Big Yank and Carhartt and La Labour, which is the French workwear brand. They are really becoming really stylish, fashionable pieces that people can put together, whether they're cooking, whether they're gardening, whether they're socialising. Like we all can't run around in gym clothes. It just really, we've got this sort of, the whole of the suburb I live is full of, they call mumble pants and things. I really think that whole athletic thing says that, to me, the big trend is function, because we've got so much more in our lives. So I remember going to a release of a brand in New York with through Joe. It's called Glossier, and all the girls were in pink overalls. It was just, they looked so cool. And so I think that there is an element of functional clothes, and particularly in the hotel, the field, is if someone doesn't look functional and looks awkward, you'll never, ever get good service from them. So I think I have a great belief that workwear is something that will become an incredibly important part of the clothing business. And the fashion side of it is a really interesting twist, but I think the functionality is very exciting.
And I think pulling out that example of the pink overall just screams to me that you don't have to sacrifice fun to be functional. What do you think of that, Flick?
Oh, we're here for that. Obviously we're all about building the foundation, as I said. So our whole mission and vision now is to become the global destination of the modern uniform. We really believe that what we're doing is unique, not just in Australia, but, with our expansion into the US, that's our core growth focus at the moment. Is really exciting, and seeing how that actually resonates, how our product resonates with other markets, it's real. And I think besides the product offering that we have, inventory ready to go, the convenience of that, we also do a lot of custom programs. So the pink overalls, if we had that brief, we'd be like on that. And that is where we have a world-class design team who have all come from retail and fashion brands. And so I think that coming back to wanting to be the best and continuing to innovate, we're here for all of that, and we're pretty passionate about that.
Amazing. Well, congratulations again on this incredible concept. I think it's such a calming but inspiring space. So it's great that you've managed to create the world of Cargo Crew for everyone to enjoy and immerse themselves in today. We are really short on time. We're over time, actually, and I'm sure everyone's getting hungry. There's some amazing food coming right up after this. Before we go, I just wanted to give each of the panelists an opportunity to share a tip or a piece of advice for the audience today, something that they can take back to their teams, and something that is practical or inspiring that they can go home with today, as well as a full belly and lots of great ideas.
I think so much of this is about good energy, and I think my partnerships and with everybody in my career, I think there's something to be said for looking out for those little sparks when something feels really right. And it's trusting your intuition often with how something feels in design or in creative direction, or, I think it's really trusting that. And I think trusting yourself and your decisions. So sometimes it sits with you with the way you lead or your values or what feels right. I think trusting that and really tuning into that is really important for creativity and design.
I'll probably go on that as well. But I think for us, as we were going through the exploration, there's so many different makers and craftspeople and designers that come into a hotel, from the person who helps with the design of the bathrobe to the uniforms to the handcrafted the scent that we've had a gentleman out of Tasmania, the raconteur, do a custom scent. I'm sure a few people are familiar with Craig, but we went on another journey and we met a bunch of other people who are doing scents and they do hotel scents, but they didn't do the thing that we wanted. So it was about meeting more people, introducing more, concepts, and really stretching and challenging everyone. So, there's amazing creativity, all around Australia, and there's wonderful sort of people that come along with that as well. So it's finding those people and getting the best out of them and really kind of like saying, here's an opportunity to do something really amazing, and we're going to support that. So that's what we've tried to do, and we're on the always looking out for new talent and new emerging kind of ideas.
I love that.
I think for us, my sister and I, something that we've really always resonated with is the saying that do interesting things and interesting things happen. And I feel like, when we're a lot smaller and it was just her and I back in the day, I think that kind of analogy really inspired us, because even putting on Cargo Crew House, last night we had the runway, today we've got the lunch and we've got an open house tomorrow. It's taking on new ways of showing up. And I think for us, it's about, showing people about we're not just a uniform company, but we're here to be part of a conversation around creativity, business and design. So my advice is do interesting things, and interesting things happen. And that is the truth. Do it.
And not all of them will work out, and that's fine.
Yeah, exactly. 100%.
Steve, final thought.
Well, that's a hard one. I think the lesson we've learned is you've really got to be as close to the customer as possible. And if you are the customer, that's the biggest advantage. So I look back on my failures and my successes, and they've always been driven by the positive reaction of customers. And I think, when I went off track, you sort of say, well, we just didn't get that right, and correct yourself very quickly. I think it's really important to keep on researching, keep on learning. Don't sort of ever think that you can't get there. I feel very incredibly proud to have been involved with what I think two terrific brands over my 60 years in business. But I do have to be honest that I love the garment business a lot better than the cosmetic business. Don't repeat that.
Staying in the house. Staying in the house.
Well, what a note to end on. Thank you for all your insights and your wisdom. And lunch will be served shortly. Of course, please continue to enjoy, network, and to share any moments from today. Don't forget to tag Cargo Crew. Please join me in thanking all our panelists again.